The last piece of firewood felt heavier than it should as Rebecca Winters held it in her trembling hands, knowing that once this burned, there would be nothing left to keep the January cold from claiming her and her 2 children. San Jose, California, in 1867, was supposed to be milder than the eastern winters she had known. But this particular season had brought unusual frost that crept through every crack in her small cabin. Her husband Thomas had died 8 months ago in a logging accident up in the Sierra foothills, leaving her with 7-year-old Daniel and 5-year-old Emma, a mortgage she could not pay, and skills that did not translate into money in this rough frontier town. Rebecca placed the wood back in the nearly empty bin beside the stone fireplace, deciding to wait until evening when the cold would be most unbearable. The children were at school, which gave her a few hours to figure out some kind of solution. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and walked to the window, looking out at the frosted landscape. The cabin sat on the edge of town where the buildings gave way to rolling hills and distant mountains. Thomas had chosen this spot because he loved the view and the quiet, but now Rebecca felt the isolation like a weight pressing down on her chest. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and most of the townspeople had their own struggles. Charity only stretched so far. She had sold almost everything of value. The good china her mother had given her, Thomas's pocket watch, even her wedding ring. The money had gone to food and the mortgage, but it was never enough. Mrs. Patterson at the general store had been kind, extending credit when she could, but Rebecca knew that generosity had limits too. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Rebecca was not expecting anyone, and unexpected visitors in her current state of poverty usually meant bad news. She smoothed her worn dress and opened the door. A man stood on her porch, so tall and broad that he seemed to block out the winter sun behind him. He wore buckskin clothing that had seen years of hard use, and his dark hair hung past his shoulders, partially covered by a fur hat. His face was weathered and bearded, with lines carved by sun and wind, but his eyes were a striking pale blue that seemed to see right through her. "Mrs. Winters," he said, his voice deep and measured. "My name is Zachary Whitmore. I trap in the mountains above town." Rebecca found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Mr. Whitmore, what can I do for you?" "It is more what I can do for you, madam. I heard in town that you might be in need of firewood." He gestured behind him where Rebecca could now see a massive wagon loaded with cut and split logs, more wood than she had seen in months. Her pride flared up instantly. "I do not need charity, Mr. Whitmore. Not charity," he said quickly. "I need someone to do some sewing and mending. My clothes are falling apart and I am useless with a needle. I thought we could trade firewood for sewing work." Rebecca studied his face, trying to determine if this was a real offer or just kindness disguised. His expression remained neutral, patient, waiting for her answer. "I suppose that would be fair," she said slowly. "Where would you like the wood stacked? Your shed around back, I am guessing. I will take care of it. You do not need to do anything." He touched the brim of his hat and turned before she could respond. Rebecca stood in the doorway, uncertain and overwhelmed. She watched as he drove the wagon around the side of her cabin. The sound of logs being unloaded and stacked reached her ears, solid and reassuring. She closed the door and leaned against it, feeling tears sting her eyes for the first time in weeks. She had been so focused on staying strong, on not breaking down, that this sudden relief cracked something inside her. She did not know how long he worked, but eventually the sound stopped. Another knock came at the door. When she opened it, Zachary stood there with a bundle of clothing in his arms. "These need mending when you have time," he said. "No rush, I will bring more wood next week." "Next week? But this is enough for months, Rebecca protested. Winter is not over yet, madam, and I have plenty more clothes that need attention. His blue eyes met hers, and she saw kindness there, but also something else, loneliness perhaps, if that is acceptable to you. Yes, she said softly. Yes, that is acceptable. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Zachary is fine, madam. I will see you next week. He left before she could say anything else, climbing onto his wagon and driving away toward the mountains. Rebecca carried his clothes inside and set them on her table. The garments smelled of wood smoke and pine, and they were indeed in need of repair. Tears in the buckskin, missing buttons, seams coming apart. She could do this work easily. That evening, when Daniel and Emma came home from school, they found the cabin warm and their mother actually smiling. Rebecca had built a proper fire, not the pitiful small flames she had been rationing, and the heat filled every corner of their home. "Mama, we have fire," Emma said, her small face lighting up as she rushed to the fireplace to warm her hands. "Yes, sweetheart. A kind man brought us firewood in exchange for some sewing work." "Will he come back?" Daniel asked. At 7, he was becoming the man of the house, serious and watchful. "Next week," he said. Daniel nodded, seeming to approve. They ate a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, but the warmth made everything feel like a feast. That night, Rebecca sat by the fire and began mending Zachary's clothes by lamplight, her needle moving in practiced motions. She found herself wondering about him, this mountain man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not quite spoken. The week passed quickly. Rebecca finished the mending and washed the clothes, folding them neatly into the same bundle. She found herself looking toward the road more often than she should, watching for his wagon. When it finally appeared the following Tuesday, her heart jumped in a way that made her feel guilty and confused. Zachary drove up to her cabin and climbed down, carrying another load of wood. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Winters." "Good afternoon. Your clothes are ready. That was fast. You do good work." He began unloading the wagon again, and this time Rebecca came outside to protest. "This is too much wood for one bundle of mending," she said. "Then I will bring more clothes," he replied simply, continuing his work. Rebecca watched him for a moment, then said, "Would you like some coffee? It is cold out here." He paused, looking at her with those pale blue eyes. "That would be welcome, madam, thank you." She went inside and prepared coffee, her hands shaking slightly. She did not know why she was nervous. This was just a transaction, nothing more. But when he came in, removing his hat and having to duck slightly through her doorway, the cabin suddenly felt very small and intimate. Zachary sat at her table, looking enormous in her small chair. She poured coffee for both of them and sat across from him, the bundle of mended clothes between them. "You did fine work," he said, examining one of the shirts. "Better than it was when it was new. Thank you. It was easy enough." "Where do you trap?" "Up in the Diablo Range, mostly. Some in the Santa Cruz Mountains when the season is right. I have a cabin about 15 miles from here, higher up where the snow stays longer." "You come to town often?" "Once a month usually, to trade pelts and get supplies." "But I will be coming more frequently now." He sipped his coffee and their eyes met over the rim of his cup. "If that is all right with you." "I appreciate the work," Rebecca said carefully, "and the children appreciate the warmth. I saw them watching from the window, fine-looking children. They must miss their father. Every day. Daniel tries to be brave, but Emma still cries at night sometimes." Rebecca did not know why she was sharing this with a stranger, but something about Zachary invited confidence. "It is a hard thing, losing a parent. I lost mine young too. Different circumstances, but the hurt is the same." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easier than Rebecca expected. Zachary told her about life in the mountains, about tracking animals and reading weather, about the silence that could heal or drive a person mad depending on their nature. Rebecca talked about her life before Thomas died, about the dreams they had for their homestead, about the struggle of the past months. When he finally left, Rebecca felt something she had not felt since Thomas died. Hope, not just for survival, but for something beyond mere existence. The pattern continued for weeks. Zachary would bring wood and clothes that needed mending, though Rebecca began to suspect he was deliberately tearing things or finding work that did not really need doing. She did not mind. She looked forward to his visits, to their conversations over coffee, to the way he was gentle and patient with Daniel and Emma when he occasionally saw them. Daniel warmed to him first. Zachary taught him how to identify animal tracks in the mud and showed him how to properly stack wood so it would stay dry. Emma was more hesitant, but she eventually came around when Zachary carved her a small doll from a piece of pine. "You did not have to do that," Rebecca said, watching Emma clutch the doll to her chest with delight. "I wanted to. She reminds me of my sister at that age, before everything happened." He did not elaborate, and Rebecca did not push. February came with more rain than frost, and the cabin roof began to leak. Rebecca put out buckets and pans to catch the drips, but she knew the roof needed real repair. She had no money for it and no idea how to do the work herself. When Zachary arrived the following week, he noticed immediately. "Your roof is leaking." "Yes, but I will manage. I always do. Mrs. Winters, I could fix that for you." "No, you have done too much already. I cannot keep accepting your help." "Then let me do it for pay. I will fix your roof and you can pay me back however you can, whenever you can. Or consider it payment for future mending work. I do not care about the details, but that roof needs fixing before the wood underneath rots." Rebecca looked at him, standing in her small cabin with his head nearly touching the ceiling beams, this mountain man who had appeared in her life like a guardian from a storybook. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "The truth, please." Zachary was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was even deeper than usual. "Because when I first saw you in town trying to sell your wedding ring to buy flour, you had this look on your face, like you were breaking inside but refusing to show it. I know that look. I have worn it myself. And I thought if I could help, maybe it would balance something out. Maybe it would make the universe a little less cruel." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. "You saw that." "I did. And I went back to my cabin and could not stop thinking about it, about you, about how unfair it all was, so I came back. I do not know what to say. Say I can fix your roof." She laughed through her tears. "Yes, please fix my roof." He did, spending 3 full days replacing damaged shingles and reinforcing weak spots. Daniel helped him, handing up tools and materials, soaking up Zachary's patient instruction. Rebecca watched from the garden where she was trying to prepare the soil for spring planting, and she found her eyes drawn to Zachary more often than the work required. He moved with confidence and capability, his large frame balanced easily on her roof. When he smiled down at something Daniel said, his whole face transformed, becoming younger and more open. Rebecca felt something stirring in her chest, something she had not expected to feel again. Guilt followed immediately. Thomas had only been gone 8 months. Was it wrong to feel attracted to another man so soon? Was it disloyal to her husband's memory? But when Zachary climbed down from the roof that evening, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool February air, and smiled at her with such genuine warmth, the guilt faded. Thomas would not have wanted her to be alone and struggling. He would have wanted her to be happy, to be cared for, to live fully. "All done," Zachary said. "Should hold for many years now. I do not know how to thank you. Have dinner with me." In town, at the hotel restaurant. Let me take you somewhere nice. Rebecca's breath caught. This was more than trading work. This was courting. I do not know if I should. I understand if it is too soon. I am not trying to rush you into anything. I just want to spend time with you, Rebecca. It was the first time he had used her given name. I want to know you better. I want to see if what I am feeling is real. What are you feeling? He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his beard, the exact shade of blue in his eyes. Like I have been living half a life in those mountains, and you make me want to live a whole one again. I feel it too, she whispered, and it terrifies me. We can go slow as you need, but say yes to dinner, please. Yes, she said. Yes, I will have dinner with you, Mrs. Patterson from the general store agreed to watch Daniel and Emma. The older woman had a knowing smile when Rebecca asked, and Rebecca realized that probably the whole town had been watching this developing relationship. Small towns had no secrets. Rebecca wore her best dress, which was still plain and worn, but she had kept it in good condition. She pinned up her auburn hair and looked at herself in the small mirror, seeing a woman who looked years older than her 26 years. Hard work and grief had aged her. When Zachary arrived to collect her, he wore clean clothes and had trimmed his beard. He looked almost civilized, though there was still something wild and untamed about him that no amount of grooming could hide. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. They walked into town together as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The hotel restaurant was the nicest establishment in San Jose, and Rebecca had not been there since her wedding celebration. She felt out of place in her plain dress, but Zachary seemed completely unbothered, guiding her to a table by the window with a gentle hand on her back. They ordered steaks and potatoes, food that Rebecca had not eaten in months. When it arrived, she had to restrain herself from eating too quickly, too desperately. Zachary noticed and said nothing, just made conversation that took the focus off the food. "Tell me about your life before California," he said. "Ohio. My father was a banker. I had a very ordinary childhood, very sheltered. I met Thomas when he came to work for my father. He had dreams of coming west, of building something from nothing. I married him partly because I loved him and partly because I wanted adventure." She smiled sadly. "I got the adventure, but not the way I expected. Do you regret it?" "No, I have Daniel and Emma. I had 7 good years with Thomas. I would not trade that, even knowing how it would end." Zachary reached across the table and took her hand. His hand was huge and rough, calloused from years of hard work, but his touch was gentle. "You are a strong woman, Rebecca Winters." "I do not feel strong. I feel like I am barely holding on most days. That is what strength is, holding on when everything is telling you to let go." They talked through dinner and dessert, through coffee and more conversation. Rebecca learned that Zachary was 34 years old, that he had been trapping and hunting since he was 16, that he had a sister somewhere back east he had not seen in 10 years. He told her about the beauty and loneliness of the mountains, about watching elk herds move through valleys, about winters so harsh they felt personal. "Why do you stay up there?" Rebecca asked. "It sounds so isolating." "It has been easier than dealing with people. After what happened with my family, after losing them the way I did, it felt safer to be alone." He paused. "Until recently." "What changed?" "I met a widow who was selling her wedding ring to buy flour, and suddenly alone did not feel safer anymore. It just felt alone." The walk back to her cabin felt too short. Rebecca found herself slowing her pace, not wanting the evening to end. When they reached her door, Zachary stopped and turned to face her. "I would like to court you properly, Rebecca. With your permission." "You have it," she said softly. You have had it for weeks, if I am being honest." He smiled, that transformative smile that made him look years younger. "Good, that is good." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. When she did not, he kissed her forehead gently. "Sleep well." Rebecca went inside and leaned against the closed door, her heart pounding. Mrs. Patterson looked up from her knitting with a knowing expression. "Good evening," she asked. "Very good," Rebecca said, unable to keep the smile from her face. March brought warmer weather and hope. Zachary came to town twice a week now, always with some excuse. Wood that did not need stacking, mending that did not need doing, repairs that were barely necessary. They both knew the truth, but neither spoke it aloud. They were simply finding reasons to be together. He brought Rebecca seeds for her garden and helped her plant them. He fixed her fence and reinforced her chicken coop. He took Daniel fishing and taught Emma how to whistle using a blade of grass. He courted Rebecca with a patience and gentleness that made her fall deeper in love with every passing day. Because she was in love. She could admit it to herself now, lying in bed at night with the sound of her children sleeping nearby. She was in love with Zachary Whitmore, this mountain man who had filled not just her woodshed but her entire life with warmth and possibility. One warm April evening, after the children were in bed, Rebecca and Zachary sat on her porch watching the stars emerge. The night was clear and mild, full of the promise of spring. "I want to tell you something," Zachary said, "about my family, about why I went to the mountains." Rebecca waited, sensing that this was important. "My father was a violent man, drank too much, hit too hard. When I was 18, he went after my mother with a knife during one of his rages. I stopped him, but in the process, he died. Hit his head on the corner of the stove when I pushed him away." Zachary's voice was steady but strained. "The law said it was self-defense, that I was protecting my mother. But the town saw me as the boy who killed his father. My mother could not look at me the same way after. My sister was only 12 and she was afraid of me." "Oh, Zachary," Rebecca breathed. "I left because staying was hurting them more. Went to the mountains and told myself I was better off alone. Convinced myself I did not deserve anything else, and for 16 years I believed it." He turned to look at her, his eyes bright in the darkness. "Then I saw you and something woke up inside me, something I thought was dead." Rebecca took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You are a good man. What happened was not your fault. You saved your mother's life. I know that in my head, but my heart has taken longer to believe it. Does your heart believe it now? It is starting to. You make me believe I could be more than just the man who lives in the mountains. You make me want to be part of the world again." Rebecca leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. "I was drowning before you came, not just in poverty but in hopelessness. You saved me, Zachary. In every way that matters." He turned and cupped her face in his large hands, looking at her with such intensity that she felt it in her bones. "I love you, Rebecca. I think I have loved you since that first day I saw you trying so hard to be brave." "I love you too," she whispered, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It was her first kiss since Thomas, and for a moment guilt flashed through her. But then she let it go, let herself feel this new love that was different from what she had with Thomas but no less real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me. I know it is fast, but I have wasted enough of my life alone. I do not want to waste another day. Marry me, Rebecca." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in early May in the small church in San Jose. Rebecca wore a new dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make from fabric Zachary insisted on buying. Daniel stood beside Zachary as his best man, serious and proud in his role. Emma scattered wildflowers down the aisle, her small face glowing with happiness. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Zachary did so with such tender passion that several of the older women in attendance fanned themselves. Rebecca felt complete in a way she had not expected to feel again, not replacing what she had lost, but building something new and equally precious. Zachary had spent the past weeks building an addition onto Rebecca's cabin, creating a larger space for their family. He also kept his mountain cabin for trapping season, but he told her his home was wherever she was now. "I will go up for a few weeks at a time during trapping season," he explained. "But those days of spending months alone are over. I need you too much." Their wedding night was tender and passionate. Rebecca had been nervous, feeling disloyal and strange, but Zachary took his time, making sure she felt comfortable and cherished. When they finally came together, it felt right, like pieces sliding into place. Life settled into a new rhythm. Zachary did his trapping and hunting, but he was home far more than he was gone. He taught Daniel to hunt and track, spending hours with the boy in the woods. Emma followed him everywhere when he was home, chattering constantly, and Zachary listened to every word with patient attention. Rebecca's garden flourished under their combined care. With Zachary's help and the security he provided, she was able to pay off the mortgage within a year. She no longer laid awake at night worrying about money or firewood or how to feed her children. Summer turned to fall and Rebecca realized she was pregnant. When she told Zachary, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are having a baby." "Are you happy?" Rebecca asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not cover it. I never thought I would have this. A family, a home, a child of my own. You have given me everything, Rebecca." "You gave me everything first," she replied, kissing him deeply. Their son was born in late spring of 1869, arriving after a relatively easy labor. They named him Thomas, after Rebecca's first husband, and Zachary's gesture in suggesting the name made Rebecca love him even more. "Thomas gave you Daniel and Emma," Zachary said. "He deserves to be remembered with honor." Little Thomas was a loud, energetic baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. Daniel and Emma doted on him, fighting over who got to hold him. The cabin rang with noise and life, so different from the cold, quiet desperation of 2 years earlier. Zachary proved to be a devoted father. He would walk the floor with Thomas at night, singing old mountain songs in his deep voice. He changed dirty diapers without complaint and marveled at every tiny milestone. "I never knew," he told Rebecca one evening as they watched Thomas sleep in his cradle. "I never knew life could be this full, this good." "Neither did I," Rebecca said. "Not like this. What I had before was good, but this is different. Better is not the right word because that feels disloyal to Thomas's memory. But more complete, maybe. Like I was walking through life, and now I am living it." The years passed in a blur of happiness. Daniel grew tall and strong, learning everything Zachary could teach him about surviving in the wilderness. By age 13, he could track a deer for miles and bring it down with a clean shot. But he was also gentle and studious, reading every book he could get his hands on. Emma became a beautiful young woman who looked remarkably like her mother. She was creative and spirited, always singing or drawing or inventing elaborate stories. Zachary encouraged all of it, bringing her pencils and paper from town, listening to her stories with genuine interest. Thomas grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy who was afraid of nothing. He would climb anything, explore everything, and ask 1,000 questions a day. Watching Zachary with his son made Rebecca's heart swell. He was so patient, so present, so different from his own father. In 1872, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. She was a calm, observant baby who seemed to take everything in with wise eyes. Emma was 13 by then and helped care for her new sister with maternal dedication. Their home was always full of life and noise. Daniel brought home friends from school. Emma organized elaborate theatrical productions using the barn as a stage. Thomas was constantly dragging home injured animals for his parents to heal. Rose toddled after everyone, trying to keep up with her older siblings. Zachary expanded their property, buying the adjacent land and building a larger house with space for everyone. He never went back to living in the mountains for extended periods. His trapping became more of a seasonal occupation than a lifestyle, something he did to supplement their income rather than his sole purpose. One evening in the fall of 1875, Rebecca and Zachary sat on their porch watching the sunset. The children were inside doing their various activities, and the sound of their voices and laughter drifted out through the open windows. "You ever miss it?" Rebecca asked. "The solitude of the mountains." Zachary was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity, but I do not miss the loneliness, not for a second. This," he gestured toward the house, toward the sounds of their family, "this is what I was meant for. I just did not know it until I met you. I was so scared that day you first came, scared to accept help, scared to hope things could get better. I was scared too. Scared you would turn me away, scared I had forgotten how to be around people, scared I would mess it all up." He took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "But you took a chance on a rough mountain man with a wagon full of firewood." "Best decision I ever made," Rebecca said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Second best," Zachary corrected. "The best was saying yes when I asked you to marry me." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. Stars began to appear, the same stars they had watched on the night Zachary proposed. "I want to find my sister," Zachary said suddenly. "I have been thinking about it for a while. She would be 28 now. Probably married with children of her own. I want her to know that I am okay, that I found happiness. I want her to meet you and the children." "Then we will find her," Rebecca said simply. "Where do we start?" The last I heard, she was still in Missouri, in the town where we grew up. "I can write to the postmaster there, see if they know where she ended up." Zachary did write, and 3 months later he received a response. His sister Martha was indeed still in Missouri, married to a schoolteacher with 4 children of her own. She had never stopped wondering what happened to her older brother. The correspondence that followed was emotional and healing. Martha wrote that she had never been afraid of Zachary, that she had been a confused child who did not understand what was happening. She had spent years wishing she could find him, wanting him to know that she loved him, that she never blamed him for what happened with their father. In the spring of 1876, Martha and her family made the journey west to visit. The reunion between Zachary and his sister was tearful and joyful. Martha looked at Zachary's life, at his wife and children and property, at the peace and happiness radiating from him, and she cried. "I am so glad you found this," she told him. "I worried about you alone in the mountains for so many years." "I would still be there if not for Rebecca," Zachary said, looking at his wife with such love that Martha teared up again. The two families spent 3 weeks together, and by the end, they were planning regular visits. Martha's children and Zachary's children became fast friends, and the adults stayed up late every night talking, trying to make up for lost years. When Martha's family left to return to Missouri, there were promises to write regularly and visit again soon. Zachary stood waving long after their wagon disappeared from view, Rebecca's hand in his. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me back my family, for giving me back myself, for seeing something worth saving in a broken mountain man. You were never broken, Zachary, just lost. And you found your way home. The years continued to pass, each one full and rich. Daniel decided he wanted to be a doctor and left for medical school in San Francisco. Emma married a kind young rancher and settled nearby, close enough to visit often. Thomas took over the trapping business from his father, though he did it with Zachary's insistence on balance between work and family. Rose became a teacher, much to everyone's pride. Zachary and Rebecca grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and full lives. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it deepened with every passing year. In 1890, on their 23rd wedding anniversary, Zachary took Rebecca back to her old cabin. It still stood, though they had not lived there in years. The woodshed was still there too, the one he had filled all those years ago. "You remember?" he asked. "Every detail. I was counting pieces of firewood, trying to decide if I could make it through one more week. And then you appeared like an answer to a prayer." "I was the one being answered," Zachary said. "I did not even know I was praying, but I was. Praying for a reason to come down from that mountain, a reason to live instead of just existing. And there you were." They stood in the small cabin where their love had begun, holding hands like the young people they had been. Outside, they could hear their grandchildren playing. Daniel had brought his family for the anniversary celebration. Emma and her husband had come with their 5 children. Thomas and his wife had 2 little ones. Even Rose had brought a young man she was courting seriously. "Can you believe all this came from one wagon of firewood?" Rebecca asked. "I can believe it because I lived it. But if someone had told me back then, when I was living alone in my mountain cabin, that I would end up here with you, with all of this family and love and life, I would have thought they were crazy. And now I know that sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest acts of courage. Mine was loading up that wagon and driving to your door. Yours was letting me in, letting yourself hope again." They kissed, tender and sweet, with 23 years of love and partnership behind it. Then they walked back to where their family waited, to the celebration, to the continuation of the life they had built together. That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Rebecca and Zachary sat on their porch one more time. This had become their ritual over the years, this quiet time together under the stars. "I have been thinking," Zachary said, "about what happens next. We are not young anymore." "Getting philosophical in your old age," Rebecca teased. "Maybe. But I want you to know that whatever time we have left, I treasure every moment. Every morning I wake up next to you is a gift. Every dinner with our family around the table is a blessing. Every quiet evening like this is perfect. I feel the same way. You know what I think about sometimes? That day you filled my woodshed. I think about how I was so focused on just surviving, just making it through one more day. I could not see beyond the next meal, the next cold night. And you gave me the ability to see further, to hope for more. You gave me the warmth I needed to survive, but more than that, you gave me the warmth I needed to truly live." Zachary pulled her close, and they sat together as the night deepened around them. Inside their house, their children and grandchildren slept. On their land, the evidence of their hard work and dedication stretched in all directions. In their hearts, love that had started with a simple act of kindness had grown into something vast and unshakable. The years that followed continued in much the same pattern. Births and deaths, celebrations and sorrows, the normal rhythm of a life well lived. Daniel became a respected doctor, saving lives and making a difference. Emma's ranch prospered, and she and her husband became pillars of the community. Thomas ran his trapping business with integrity and skill, always home by evening to be with his family. Rose married her young man, and they opened a school together. Zachary and Rebecca became the matriarch and patriarch of a large, loving family. Their grandchildren multiplied, and eventually great-grandchildren arrived. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every summer gathering, their home was filled to bursting with family. They grew old gracefully, supporting each other through ailments and aches, through the losses that come with age. When Martha died in 1895, Zachary grieved deeply, but Rebecca was there to hold him through it. When Mrs. Patterson passed the following year, Rebecca mourned the woman who had been so kind to her, and Zachary provided comfort and strength. In 1898, on a warm June evening, Zachary and Rebecca celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary. They were 70 and 65 years old, still living in the house Zachary had built, still taking their evening seat on the porch. 31 years, Rebecca said, marveling at the time that had passed. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. Best 31 years of my life, Zachary said. His body was slower now, his movements more careful, but his eyes were still that striking pale blue, and they still looked at Rebecca with complete adoration. You ever regret it? Leaving the mountains, taking on a ready-made family, all of it? Not for 1 second. Do you regret letting a strange mountain man into your life? Never. You saved us, Zachary, and not just with firewood. You saved our spirits. You gave us hope and love and security. You gave my children a father when they desperately needed one. You gave me a partner and a love that I thought I would never have again. Zachary took her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after all these years. I was the one who was saved, Rebecca. I was dying up in those mountains just slowly. You gave me life again. Real life, full and messy and beautiful. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for decades. Inside, they could hear Thomas and his wife preparing dinner. The sound of their grandchildren playing drifted from the yard. I want you to know something, Zachary said, his voice serious. Whatever comes next, whenever it comes, I am ready, because I got more than I ever dreamed possible. I got you, I got our family, I got a lifetime of love. A man cannot ask for more than that. We still have time, Rebecca said, though she knew what he meant. They were both getting older and the end would come eventually. I know, and I will fight for every moment with you, but I also have peace, Rebecca, because I know that what we built will continue. Our children and grandchildren will carry on. The love we created, it does not end with us. Rebecca leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him that had been her comfort and home for over 3 decades. I love you, Zachary Whitmore. From that first day with the firewood until my last breath, I will love you. And I love you, Rebecca Whitmore. You are my salvation, my joy, my everything. They sat together as the stars came out, the same stars they had watched on countless evenings throughout their marriage. The night was warm and gentle, full of the sounds of family and life. And in that moment, surrounded by everything they had built together, both Rebecca and Zachary felt complete. The story that had started with a widow rationing her last piece of firewood and a mountain man with a wagon full of wood had become a love story for the ages. It was a story of second chances and new beginnings, of courage and kindness, of a love that had saved 2 broken people and created something beautiful and lasting. As they sat on their porch that evening, holding hands and watching the stars, Rebecca and Zachary knew that whatever time they had left would be spent exactly like this. Together, surrounded by love, grateful for every moment. The firewood had been consumed long ago, but the warmth it had started still burned bright in their hearts and in the family they had created together. Their love story would continue through their children and grandchildren, through the values they had instilled and the example they had set. It would live on in every act of kindness, every second chance given, every heart open to the possibility of love after loss, and it had all started with a simple act. A mountain man filling a widow's woodshed, and in doing so, filling her life with warmth, hope, and a love that would last forever.